You're on the air.
Well,
You start off from telling me about your story about the Army again.
well, look, I'll tell you, look, today is Saturday, October the 18th, 1986,
Right.
and Jay is visiting me here at Tiffany House, where I'm staying. I'm more or less enjoying my stay here, no complaints. He wants me to talk to him about my past events there. I think I've told him a lot about it. He wants me to go back to World War I or after World War I. I got to refresh my memory a little bit. Well, to start with, I was discharged from the Army from Washington, D.C. on December 25th, 1918. I had very little money. I think I had accumulated a few $100s there. And I had no place of business, but I rented a part of an office space for about $10 a month, and I started going to auctions. And I started buying all sorts of things. Anything came along.
Would you have a friend that told you about auctions, or how did you hear about auctions?
Well, how do I know about auctions? Well, when I was 10 years old, we had a candy store on Willard Street on the Lower East Side, and on the corner, at Competition, there was a store that was called Cheap Charlie's or whatever it was. And my father called his store Cheap Sam. And Charlie went out of business, and it was sold at auction. So I went to that auction sale at 10 years of age. My father was there with me, and that was my first auction purchase. I spent about $50 or $60 to put into the store. We had no station or anything like this. We had a candy store, a candy fountain, and so on. So I bought about $60 worth of merchandise and put it in the store. And it was really my first business adventure. Well, however, when I got out of the Army and had nothing to do, so I started going to auctions. And I remember going, the Railway Express used to have frequent auctions, things that were lost in shipping or unclaimed and so on. And nothing was, everything was sold sight unseen, cotton. So you bought a carton of this or a carton of that or whatever it is. And I started bringing them into my place there, hoping to find prizes in there. Well, many of the things were salesman samples. One of the things I bought that maybe people nowadays wouldn't know anything about, leather puttees that were used by the Army officers. They were very expensive, made of leather, and they went around your foot. The officers wore them. So I had the whole maybe 50 or 60 pieces there. These were all samples. There were no lefts and no rights, you know. They wore in pairs. So that was my first experience with one of the bad buys. And then I started buying other things. And finally I I didn't know what to buy. I bought anything that came along. I started following the bankruptcy auctions. And there was a big pearl button manufacturer went broke. It was sold at auction. So I went there. They were selling. There were very few buyers. There was tremendous amounts of buttons, and I started buying. And this was $1, $2 or $3, whatever it was, and I wound up spending about $500–600 on pearl buttons, and it was a total loss to me because I didn't buy the first quality buttons. I bought the big batches of the third or fourth quality. Well, I could have made a lot of money if I'd have bought the regular things there. However, I finally managed to dispose of them one way or another. And that was one of my mistakes. And I used that in part of a man's store. I finally rented a half a store on Lisbonard Street, which was below Canal Street. I rented that for $50 a month. And I put up shelves and so on. I had nothing. The store was empty, had no goods. This was right after the war. And I come to a place they were selling wooden toy battleships. And of course it was after the war, people didn't want to buy wooden battleships, you know. But however, they were so cheap, I bought them for a nickel a piece, 6 cents a piece, so different sizes. And before I knew it, I spent about $700 for it. And I started bringing them in the store and putting them in the shelves. I had a store full of warships that nobody wanted. Well, I don't know whether I learned anything from it, but from that I started buying dry goods. Underwear, sweaters, shoes, whatever, anything that came along. And before you know it, I moved this to a larger shop and I had a whole shop full of dry goods, from sweaters to umbrellas to whatnot there. And my brother, Hyman, wanted to be he was a partner at the time that I bought this thing. We started, we didn't have, we had very little money between the two of us. But however, the banks in those days were so lenient with lending money. If you opened an account and you had $100 or $200 in the account, you can borrow $500 on your own name there. And finally, we worked it up and we could borrow $1,000. Finally, we could buy borrow $2,000. And my brother got a big head. He wanted we had a big stock there, and he wanted to go out of. He wanted to go out of. He wanted to dissolve the partnership. He had some other idea there, and he wanted $5,000 for his share. Well, however, I borrowed the $5,000 and I gave it to him, and the business became my own. And the things that I bought were unbelievable. He failed in his business, however, with his $5,000. By the way, while I was still in partnership with him, I knew we started with nothing, or with very little money, and I bought a lot of very fine kid gloves and things, the original box, and many other things. And I had bought out a man that manufactured hats of all kinds, like for miners, railroad engineers, raccoon hats, you know, for these, for Dave, or whatever, you know, with caps of all sorts, for the northern bakers' caps, all sorts of things there. And I remember I bought that on my own. My brother didn't know anything about it. And I think I paid $2,600. It was a whole building full of stuff there. And I moved into the store was full of hats and caps and of all kinds. Well, I managed to sell a good part of it there. Then, one day, while my brother was out for lunch, a man came by. He walked in, he looked around, he said, "You want to sell the stock?" I said, "Sure, I'll sell the stock." I said, "What did you give me for it?" I said, "I don't know what you want." "What do I?" I said, "I don't know what. Tell me what you give me for it." He looked around and said, "I'll give you $5,000. So I said, "Sold." So he gave me a couple $100. In those days they had gold-backed money. Yeah, bills were printed in that time with a gold seal on them, so that you can go to the treasury and get for $100 you get $100 in gold. You get 5 $20 gold pieces for it, which didn't mean any difference whether it was, because at that time we didn't appreciate whether the gold. Well, however, it gave me a deposit of a few $100s, and I was hungry. Hyman hadn't come back yet, and I made the deal with him. We shook hands and put a lock on the door. He put his lock on, I put my lock on. Now, Hyman came back from lunch. He was frustrated. He couldn't get in. He didn't know what happened. I finally came back. I told him I sold it. He said, "What do you mean you sold it?" And then I sold it. The guy offered me $5,000. I said, "We started with nothing. We had nothing. You got $5,000 now." Well, however, he was agreeable to that. That was one time that I sold the stock. Then I rented a bigger store. I was on my own now. I rented a bigger. No, he was still with me. He was still with me. I rented a bigger store. It was then that he wanted his $5,000. This store was jammed with all sorts of stuff there. I went to another bankruptcy sale. The man was an importer, the firm were an importer of things that were used by the ladies in those days, in the 1880s, hat pins, fancy hat pins, you know, with all sorts of jewel stones on them, and fancy buckles, stuffed birds that were used on ladies' hats. You see, they used, they would, you know, these fancy big rimmed hats. They would put a bird on it. It was a live bird, a stuffed bird, you know. It wasn't live, I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
was
looked
stuffed.
like a real bird.
It was originally live. And jet trimmings and jet ornaments. That buy also amounted about $700. I had a big basement, and I put that down a basement there. And also, all sorts of things I bought and sold. Oh, I bought, at a sale, I bought a lot of, from Vienna, bentwood chairs that were knocked down, that they had to be assembled. And they came in large crates that weighed about 1,000 pounds apiece. I don't know how many, I don't remember how many chairs there were. And you had to match each piece to, you know, to put the chairs together. So I had somebody to put the chairs together. And some guy came to me and he wanted to be a partner. He was a partner. He sold a lot of them to Metro Goldwyn Mayer and that sort of thing. And I bought a lot of chandeliers, crystal chandeliers. Some of them also knocked down and had to be assembled. And I sold it. However, there wasn't a thing that I didn't handle. Then another guy came along to me, and he wanted to buy the stock. And he offered me $5,000, and I sold it to him. I gave up that store, and I moved up to Broadway. I had bought out a lot of bric-a-brac at warehouses, original shipments. Jeanette knows about some of these things that I brought in, spoiled china and lamps and all other things like that, and resin figurines. So I bought that stuff. And finally, around 1929, I had to move out of my store on Broadway, and I moved to Madison Avenue, 59th and 60th Street. That was before the big crash. The landlords that bought the property from 59th to 60th Street were paying everybody money for their leases. And by the time that the crash came around, they had empty stores there. So I rented a big store there for $200 a month, month to month. I loaded that. You could buy the best antiques for peanuts, for pennies. And of course, it was very difficult to sell because the people weren't buying that stuff there. Yeah. I had the finest china, the finest bric-a-brac. Finally, they told me to give up the store. I had to move up that store. I couldn't move it anywhere. I had no other store to go to. Oh, in the meantime, Tiffany went into bankruptcy. And I went to their factory in Corona, Long Island. To the factory where they had Tiffany glass. And I bought about 7,000 pieces of Tiffany glass, from little nut dishes to vases, for 5 to 10 cents a piece. And plates, all sorts of things there, Tiffany there. And you couldn't move them, there was no sale for it. So I used to put a dozen pieces or more in a cart and send them into auction, and would bring 12, 15, 18. Oh, but before I get to that story, 7,000 people, my store was jammed, I couldn't put them in. One of the stores next door was empty, and the landlord let me use it for $50 a month. My whole place was also amounted about $700. And here I was paying $50 a month to store these damn things. It would cost me in a year's time almost as much again. So I had to dump the stuff to get what I could for it. People today couldn't believe that I put out Tiffany candlesticks for 95 cents a pair that are bringing $1,000 a day. And little nut dishes and finger bowls I was putting out for 25 cents that are bringing hundreds of dollars a day.
Tiffany went bankrupt when the stock market crashed?
Yeah, that's when the stock market broke. Everything, the people that bought the building, they went broke and committed suicide. Everybody, all throughout, you could buy any building on Madison Avenue for nothing if you just took over the mortgage. Matter of fact, we had a house in Brooklyn where I was living with Tina and with the children on East 10th Street, a two-story, two apartments, you know, on the corner of Avenue M. And the owner came to me. He offered me the building to take it over to pay the mortgage. The price of the building was $7,500, and I didn't have brains enough to take. I didn't have the money or the means to take it over. I wasn't too keen about real estate. However, when I had to give up that store, what was I going to do with that stock again? So I called another auctioneer. The same thing. Oh, he offered me $5,000. I sold it to him. Then, of course, later on, I started off with my own store. It was tough sledding during the Depression years. Anything that was, you couldn't get $5 for things that were worth $100. I have so many tales to tell about items that I had that are priceless today, that were sold for just a few dollars, and there was no takers. It didn't start, the antique business didn't start to improve a little bit until after Franklin Roosevelt came in and the NRA started.
So 1935?
No, in the 1940s. I had trouble paying my rent in these stores. I couldn't meet my rent, you know. I wasn't a rich man. And believe me, while I wasn't a rich man, I was helping everybody. Everybody came to me for help. Everybody came to me for help. And what I did for everybody, everybody knows. So what I'm going to tell you. Well, what other experience can I tell you? I can tell you, well, job-related experiences before that. I think I told you some of them.
Yeah.
So, I finally rented my real store, which I think Jen has a photograph of it, at 561 Madison Avenue. And that was at, that was at 56th Street. And I remember the real estate man coming to me and begging me to buy the building. I wouldn't have to put very little money. I said, well, who can handle it? I can't. I didn't really. However, it was sold. Midland Marine put up a huge building there right now. So I had to get out. Again, I got rid of my stock. I don't remember how. I think I sold it at auction or whatever it was. Now I needed a store. So this was in the 1940s. So I went, there was a store vacant on Madison Avenue between 58 and 59th Street on the east side of the street there. And that was, I think, $250 a month. And I had trouble meeting my monthly rental. Every month I had a problem. Well, however, finally I had to get rid of that store. Now that store came before 560. 561 came after that. I had to get out of that store, then I moved to 561. Yeah, because 561 was next to my last store. From 561, in 1958, I signed the lease for Madison Avenue, corner 62nd Street. And I was scared out of my wits. I signed a 10-year lease for $120,000. $1,000 a month. Here I was paying $250. And that part of the Madison Avenue wasn't, at that time, wasn't a good business section. And I was wondering with myself whether I didn't make a mistake. But there I started making money. There I started. I had good customers, and I had good, matter of fact, a lot of my business were referrals from Tiffany. I was very friendly with the managers and the buyers at Tiffany, and they taught me a lot about, you know, about the business and the prices on china and silver and things like that. They were great help to me. As a matter of fact, I used to send gifts every Christmas to the salespeople, to all the salespeople at Tiffany's. So I finally rented this store in 1958 for 10 years. And during that time, I had some very big deals there. The biggest deal I had was the purchase of the contents of the homes, 3 homes of William Fox of 20th Century Fox. I couldn't handle it myself, so I took in William Fisher and his partner, and we were 3 partners there. And the purchase price was $175,000. But previous to that, before I took them in, I had bought about $25,000 worth myself from them. You'll see some of those Pat vases I gave you the pictures of. Some of those I sold for $7,500 a pair. They're very valuable, those things. So that's where I made my money, and I was there from 1958 to 1968. And I got rid of my stocks through auction. I kept a lot of it. I rented an office temporarily on Madison Avenue. I was there from 1958 till 1970 when I came down to Fort Lauderdale. So that is the story.
Okay. That's good to know. Okay.
Well, what I'm going to tell you now should have been the first part of the story. Going back to my early days, before I became a businessman, I had a few jobs. And my job was always connected with piece goods. One of my very earliest jobs I had was with a ladies' blouse manufacturer who made voile blouses with lace insertions and lace edgings. And this is going back to very, very early. This is way, way early. This would go back to 1910, I imagine. Yeah, about 1910. I did the first job in this blouse house there. And the boss came to me one day, he says, "Harry, do you know anything about chiffons?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, we're going to start a new line of chiffon blouses." They used to make them of cotton voile. And he put me in charge of silk chiffons. And he bought me a little counting glass that can count the threads. And I became an expert on chiffons. I was the buyer of chiffons and laces. Going back even still further back, you know, these things you think of them as you go along. Really, my first job I had was at John Wanamaker's on Broadway and 8th Street. I was in the silk department. My job, the ladies used to come shopping in their carriages, horse and carriage, and that footman, and the driver of the coach, and they would line up on 8th Street, these coaches. They got a number, and when a woman made a purchase, she was given a number when she came up, and she made a purchase of silk. They wrapped it up and gave it to me to make sure that it went to that coach there. So my job was to deliver the purchase from the silk department. In those days, the silk, not only the silk department, but the piece goods department was the main part of a department store, because in those years, everything was were made by dressmakers. You couldn't believe the size of the silk department. A square block of nothing but silks. Another floor, a square block of velvets and corduroys. Another block of linens, and all the things of that sort there. So, however,
Where is this, downtown Manhattan?
huh?
This in Manhattan?
Yeah, Broadway, New York City.
Uh-huh.
The old Wanamaker building. So, while I was waiting between calls to make a delivery, so I was scribbling on a piece of paper, you know. I was drawing something, not that I wasn't much of an artist, but I remember I was drawing stars. And it seems the manager of the employment man came by and saw me scribbling. He said, by the way, I was making $4 a week for that. He saw, he said, come on down to my office. He said, you're fired. He said, you're wasting John Wanamaker's property. Since then, I've been very careful. I don't waste paper anymore. Now, getting back to my last job, I became a buyer in dress houses, one of my last jobs, and actually one of my first business deals. I was pretty sharp in materials. I knew materials. I was sharp all around there. I knew where things were, where to get them, and so on and so forth. However, I had a job at a place with a dress manufacturer. I was getting $10 a week now. I was buying silks, thousands of dollars worth. And I knew where to buy them. But where I had taken this job, they had been buying silks from a jobber. And who was doing the buying? The head cutter was doing the buying. And he was getting a rake off, you know, to buy, but he didn't know anything about quality or, you know, whether it was seconds or what. When I came in, I could go, I knew the manufacturers of the silks. I went directly to them where I bought them at the lowest price, you know. But the jobber came to me and offered me a bribe. He said, I've been selling these people for years, he says, and now you're coming here, put me out of business, he says. He hands me a roll full of money, and I says, take that and shove it in your, get the hell out of here and never come up here again. See? So, however, he managed to trap me. And how did he trap me? He called me, he knew what I was using, and he showed me something, a piece of silk, that was a good buy. And I made the order. I told him, I'll take it. I didn't know what he wrote on the order. He didn't write down the number of that particular material, you understand? He wrote down the number of an inferior material. And he shipped it to me. I refused it and threw it back at him. So he called me to come down, and I went down and he offered me $200. I said, oh, I said, you take that goods back. I wouldn't accept his bribe then. So he said he wouldn't accept the goods. It had to be brought back to me. So I went to the boss. I made him give me a sample of material, see. So I said, look, I said, here's what I bought from him, look what he's giving me. So he shows him the order number, and the order number wasn't for the good material, but for the cheap material. I didn't realize, you know. He tells the boss, I'm trying to hold him up for a bribe for $200. The boss fires me. It was the last job I had. So, it wasn't the last job. So, I get another job in a dress, also as a buyer, $10 a week, piece silks and piece goods. Harry Feller was working there. He was a greenhorn then. He was a boy around the dress shop, or the dress factory, whatever he was doing. I was the big shot. I was hired for $10 a week there. Everything was working fine. My place where they fired me from was taken over. They got a new man, a new poke there to take my job, who knew nothing. And he needed a certain piece of material in broadcloth. He didn't know where to get it. I knew where to get it. So he tells me what he wants. I said, well, I got an idea. Now I'm going to make some money. I'll buy the piece of material, I'll sell it to them. So what happens? So what I show them, I give them the sample, and shows me, okay, if he buys them. I have no billheads, no nothing, you know. So I got to, I buy the piece of material. The piece of material I bought it from was from a cousin of where I'm working now. Get the idea?
Mm-hmm.
I went there, I bought him, I paid him cash, and I went to a stationery store, I bought a blank bill, and I wrote my name and my home address, and wrote out a bill to that firm there, piece of goods, and sent it up to them there. So, they were, you know, they got me fired up there, the head cutter was against me there, see? So when I sold them the piece of goods, they figured that I must have stole it where I'm working. Get the idea? So they called my boss where I'm working, little Jew with a little beard there, and he comes over, he says to me, he came up with the other boss, he says, you sold at Finkenberg a piece of broadcloth? I said, yeah, I sold Finkenberg a piece of broadcloth. He said, you gunner, you thief, you... I said, look, Mr. Gross, I said, don't call me a gunner for a thief. I didn't steal nothing. If you give me a chance, I'll explain to you. If you thief, you must be robbing me, you know. I slapped him in his face, you know, little old man there. And I walked out. That was the last job I had.
Did you get paid for the cloth?
Huh?
Did you get paid for the
Oh,
cloth?
I got paid for the cloth, sure, because you called your cousin and asked him where I bought the piece of material.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Then they paid me for the piece of material. It wasn't stolen.
Uh-huh.
Right after that, I went to a wedding. Then after, of course, Harry Feller was introduced to my sister Sadie, and of course they were married. Now, to get back to my first wife Tina, I went to a wedding in the hotel. Some old folks there, I don't know. And when I came out of the army, I had nobody else. I wasn't fooling around with anybody. I married her. She's a poor, very poor woman, a poor family. I remember buying her a dress so she could be married. And
you met her at a wedding?
Huh?
You met her at a wedding?
I met her at a wedding, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Some of her family's friends there. And I married her. At the time I married her, I was making $10 a week. And I rented an apartment for $25 a month. And when I lost that last job there, where I was fired from, for being a crook, then I went out, I went into the auction business. That's when I started all the other business that I'm talking about. So you got a pretty good picture of what I did. I was never I mean, people always looked at me as being a millionaire. I suffered as much during all those years. I had trouble paying my rent, my home rent, during all those bad years. Not until 1950 did I straighten out a little bit. And I was I was never rich because the minute I got money, I put it in the merchandise. The minute I got money, I put it in the merchandise. And I saw, as soon as I saw a profit, I sold it. I wouldn't sit with it. I sold a lot of, the biggest part of my business, I sold to other dealers who would probably get 2 or 3 times what they paid me for it. But I was glad I made my profit, and that was it. So, there you got my story more or less up to date. Oh, well, when I opened a store on Broadway in 1928, and things were a lot different on Broadway then than they are today. It was a little high-class neighborhood, more or less. And I had to get out of that store. That's when I went to Madison Avenue, around 1928, 1929. I'm trying to think of some of the things that I bought. I was just telling him about, I was just telling Jay, did he ever hear of a mammal, a sea mammal called a narwhal? He never did. A narwhal is a sea animal, a sea mammal that grows a tusk, a single tusk, about 8 or 10 feet long in ivory. They're very rare. I had a pair in my old shop in New York, which I sold for very little money, and fabulous. Also, I had a large rhino horn hanging around for years. I don't know what I ever did with it. They tell me it's very valuable. I also had a carved rhino horn that was carved into a flower-like cup that I sold some few years ago to Hartman for about $400 or $500. But some of the things that I had, when I look back, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. What else can I think about? Yeah, the more I think, the more things it brings back to me. That
Remember any?
shut it off for a minute. 1930. I hired a girl for $20 a week, and I had a loaded store, and I was being shoplifters over my place every day. Some of the things they stole from me that I remember, fantastic things were stolen. Later on, I became acquainted with a countess, a very good-looking countess. She claimed she lost $500,000 in the crash, and she was living in one of these temporary buildings. You could have gotten in those days these buildings that were being torn down. You could live for $25 a month. Even on Madison Avenue. I had an apartment on Madison Avenue for many years for $50 a month. So I finally hired a countess for $20 a week. With pleasure, of course. Memories. My stock was so tremendous. That's the store that I had to rent the next door store for $50 a month to store my Tiffany glass in, which I kept for about a year. Then another shop became available, almost in the same spot that my last store, Madison Avenue, 62nd Street. A woman was giving up a dress shop. She had some year or more on her lease, and she asked if I would rent it for $50 a month. So I said, well, I had enough merchandise to put in it, and I had a countess to put in it, and I put her in for $20 a week with pleasure. Memories, memories, memories. And of course we did nothing as far as selling anything. Impossible, impossible. I remember selling things for $10, we'd bring 1,000 to there was absolutely no sale for the thing. I'll never forget the story of this store. A woman come in with a dozen Pats or Pat plates. Now, very few people will, Jeanette knows what they are. They cost from $2,000 to $5,000 a dozen when they were made in England by Minton. This woman came in with the most beautiful dozen, turquoise and white, with white Pats or Pat. Dinner-sized plates. Got them in her arm. She says, she said, I want to sell these plates. She said, help me. She said, if you're going to offer me $1 a piece for them, she said, I'm going to take them out on the sidewalk and drop and break them. So I said, well, I'll give you $1.50 a piece. She said, you will? I gave her $18. They were the most beautiful plates. They couldn't be reproduced for 5,000 a day. I put them in the window. So I asked $3 a piece for them. I don't know how many people came in and priced them. $3 a piece, $3 a much too high. Finally, somebody offered me $2.50, and I just sold. And that's a picture of what the Depression days were like. And these stories are so hard to believe, because I had jades. I had a pair of jade vases that would bring 10,000 today. I couldn't get 100 for them. Matter of fact, somebody stole one of them. I had enamels, the finest enamels, the finest antiques. I'm talking about I had antique jewelry. My God, when I had a Tiffany 18-karat gold travel clock, a minute repeater. That's worth probably $10,000 today. I remember selling it for $200. And a heavy gold. Oh, some of the things are unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, however, you got it on? Well, to go on with my story, to my last story, I guess you people would like to know about me and Margot. Well, I used to go to homes. I used to buy most of my things, besides buying them at auction. I bought them in these rich homes. They either want to get rid of them for money, or they just want to get rid of them, or if the women, they had died out and the heirs were selling them. And I'd go to these homes and buy these things, you know, the china, bric-a-brac, silver, whatever. I went to this home, and it must be in the late 40s, 45, 46, 47, around that time. And this woman was one of the Bloomingdale family. And I bought a lot of stuff there for about $1,000, paid her cash for it. And I was there packing it myself. And the madam says, she goes, Margot, will you help this man with his stuff there? Margot was a lady's maid for one of the Bloomingdales. That's where I met Margot. And she, what can I tell you? She appealed to me. And we started off. Well, I guess both, the family, I guess, knows the rest. That's it. 20s, as I was going to auction sales, bankruptcy sales, I had just bought an Essex 4-cylinder touring car with these what do you call them, iron glass curtains. You know, like the plastic curtains today, but there wasn't plastic in those years, you know. Mm-hmm. There was no plastic. Plastic came on later. And getting to plastic, I get back to one of my stories about the things that I bought are almost improbable. Well, going back to the 1920s, what did I just stop from? I started telling you about
plastics.
Huh?
About the plastics, the cars.
Oh yeah. We'll get back to in 1920. I had plastics evident. What do you call Saran wrap? You know, or whatever you call it today, was invented in France early in the century, about a little before 1920. And it came in sheets, and it hadn't been used in this country much, excepting one candy manufacturer. I just had the name on the tip of my tongue there. He made caramels, and put 5 were wrapped in a piece of that wrapping there. He was the first one to use this saran wrap, or whatever you call it then.
Plastic wrap.
Yeah. It was very costly. It cost about $20 a pound. And what I know about it is I was buying from the insurance company. They had this little stack of sheets of this saran wrap, or plastic, for which they had just paid a claim of about $800. Repetti, the name of the company was Repetti Carmels. I remember the name now, Repetti Carmels. They had just paid a claim of $800 for this little stack. I bought the lot for about $75. So what did I do? I knew that Repetti uses that there. They had had a water damage, and evidently it damaged some of these things here. But they had them cut into little size sheets, you know, to wrap these caramels in. So I went right back to Repetti and I sold it back to them for like $100 more. Now, all right, that was my fun. Now, also in the 1920s, I was buying everything. I went to bankruptcy sales. It wasn't the thing that I didn't buy. I never remember going to a sale of high button shoes, ladies' high button shoes, which were in vogue then. And the auctioneer, I knew him very well, and I could bid with him just by touching his leg or something. And I knew it was a staple, and it was in the shoe district on Broadway where all the shoe jobbers were. And I figured, geez, if I'll buy these shoes, if I can buy those shoes for $1 a pair, I know I can get $2 a pair or $1.50 a pair from right away because it was a staple. So he starts him, and I call out $1. He starts him at 10 cents a pair, and I touch him. So in those days, in this particular place, they bid half pennies. They bid 10, 10 and a half, 10 and a half, 10 and a half, 11, 11, 11 and a half, 12, 12 and a half. I kept on touching his leg. At 12, 12, 12, 12 and a half, 12 and a half. So bought him for 12 and a half cents a pair. You know, cases of them there. Well, I sold them to either Gimbel's or Macy's, I don't remember who, for about $1.75 a pair or something like that. Or something like that. Now, getting back to my first buy, I bought an Essex for a few $100s, touring. Very fast car, good old car. My experienced liner, I didn't know how to drive it. I gave a guy $5 to teach me how to drive it. It's when you get in, it's you pull this out, that's a choke. I don't remember what he told me, but he told me you pull this out. Fine, so a few times I'm going to pull it. So I put it in the garage there, and I pull it out, and I start the car, and I get out on the street, and it stalls. I try to start it, I can't start it. Guy rides by, he said, "Hey, it's choking again." And I said, "What the hell am I doing?" "What do you mean I'm choking again?" So I finally went back into the garage. I said, "I don't know, I'm having trouble with start the car here." He says, so he opens up the hood. In those days, the spark plugs were right on top. And he takes the nuts off the spark and throws them away. He said, "Well, we'll have to tow you in." So I saw where he threw it. I picked them up. And I called this guy that taught me. He said, "What did you?" I said, "I pulled it out." He said, "Did you push it back?" "No." Did I lie? Well, however, I had that car. No, I didn't have less than a month, only a few weeks. And I got it parked on Broadway where the bankruptcy auction was being held. I was buying all sorts of stuff there. And all of a sudden the auctioneer says, "How much am I bid for the packet car, I what packet car?" He says, "Outside the door there." I said, "I didn't see it." So I go out, I look at it, I had no idea what it was. No idea. So I think I buy it for something like $750. It was, I found out after, well, I had my Essex and I got my packet there. In those days there wasn't much to do with license or something, you know, easy. So I drove it to the packet to my store there, and there's all the truckers, and they stand there looking in the mirror. "Hey, you know what you got there? You had a rich man's toy there. 12-cylinder car." I said, "Is that good?" I didn't know what the hell it was. It was a magnificent car. Sorry I don't have a broad view of it. It was, the body was all aluminum. It was by a carriage maker. The carriage maker, I have the name on the card there. It finally turned out to be the Brewster factory where Leonard worked, in the airplane factory. Body by, I got the name, it's written down on the card, I have it on the
Fisher?
card.
Not Fisher.
It's written on the card there who the body is by.
Uh-huh.
Fantastic car. It had this, it was a coupe. The inside was done in broadcloth. It had navy blue silk drawer shades. It had a cut glass vase for flowers. It had a siren attached to the exhaust. It had its own pump to pump up the tires. It had 3 spares on the back, covered in black and white leather. And wherever I drove with it, the people looked at it. You know, it was admired wherever I went with it. I remember I drove by one of the big hotels, the doorman came right out, you know, I didn't stop there, you know, I just came right out to meet me there. You know. Fantastic car. I finally gave it away for nothing. I remember the axle broke on it, the rear axle broke on the thing there. Right on the street near the house. I called up packing. They sent the truck over with a new axle. They put on a new axle and charged me $60. The axle was as thick as your arm. Evidently it had a flaw. It had a flaw in one part of it. And it kept on working. You could see, you know, when it had been working almost like with a saw that it worked off there. I think I finally sold it for $250. The car was very unstable.
Unreliable.
On wet roads.
Uh-huh.
It was, the tires, while they were pneumatic tires, they were very hard. And the rims, they had steel rims that had it, nobody wanted to handle them, take them off and put them on there. And I hit a wet spot there, it would spin right around there. So I think I sold it for $250. That car today would bring $250,000.
Sure.
One of its kind. I'm trying to think of the name of the carriage maker that made the body there. Oh, I had it repainted. Duco had just come out. There was a new paint, Duco, but it didn't have a gloss. I gave the guy $240 to repaint it. He tells me it took 40 coats. They polish it down to the aluminum, like a brand new aluminum pot. They had to give it sealers and undercoats, and they rubbed it, you know, with rotten stone. When that car was finished, it was a spectacle. Big headlights, a huge bumper. It was a spectacle.
How long did you have that for?
I didn't have it too long. I got rid of it. I bought a LaSalle. Always bought them at auction. I think I told your brother. I went to a custom house sale and they had one of these import cars. Give me some of the names of the cars. The import, the old import. The
Jaguar, Jaguar, Rolls Royce.
No, how are one of these?
English, Italian.
I don't know, well, one of the fine cars that brought $250 in. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I didn't buy that.
Very exciting.